6.
Good evening. The founder of CNN and one of the most recognizable names in American media died today. Ted Turner was 87.
In Nebraska, Turner leaves behind something else, nearly 500,000 acres of Sandhills ranch land and a promise to rural communities that's in question now that he's gone.
First Alert 6's Brenna Kiefner joins us live in the newsroom, sorting through how his death could impact Nebraskans. Brenna?
Yeah, Brian and Aaron, Turner was the single largest landowner in Nebraska. In Cherry County alone, according to the Flatwater Free Press, his properties are worth nearly $120 million. Now, the question isn't just what happens to that land, it's what happens to the tax dollars that rural Nebraska has been counting on. For decades, Ted Turner's name meant one thing in the Nebraska Sandhills: bison and lots of land. At his peak, he owned nearly 500,000 acres here, more than double the size of Douglas County. In 2021, Turner made a promise. His nonprofit, the Turner Institute of Eco-Agriculture, would keep paying property taxes on the land that he donated. It was a promise that mattered for rural counties that relies on these schools and services that are funded through property taxes. But now that Turner is gone, can anyone actually hold the nonprofit to that promise?
Seems very unlikely. Unless there's some contractual provision, you can promise whatever you want and no one can hold you to it.
Paul Weitzel is an assistant professor of law at UNL. He says nothing legally stops Turner's children and grandchildren, who control the nonprofit's board, from applying for property tax exemption. But who would get it? It all comes down to one thing.
It'll depend on how the land is being used and if they apply for it. If they apply for the tax exemption and the land is predominantly used for nonprofit activities, then it'll probably be granted a tax exemption.
The Turner Institute sells bison meat. That commercial activity could complicate any exemption claim. And if the property taxes stop, it would be costly. According to the Flatwater Free Press, Cherry County alone could lose more than $960,000 a year.
And if they lost that revenue, that could decrease the amount of services that were provided, or the municipalities would have to come up with some other way of raising the revenue, maybe through bonds or higher taxes.
And for now, he says day-to-day operations on Turner's ranches are unlikely to change, but the bigger question of whether his word holds is one only Turner's family can answer. Now, we reached out to Turner Enterprises and the Turner Institute of Eco-Agriculture for a comment, but did not hear back today. Live in the newsroom, Brenna Kiefner, First Alert 6.
Thanks.